with no further ado, Ryan Castle, the CEO of the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Great conversation today. What I want to do, though, is let everyone stand up and stretch, because we're not taking a break. We're rolling through this because we're having such good conversation. So I'm not usually the one that gets to provide the energy in the room, so let's do this. All right, there you go. All right, sit down. Let's get going. That's enough stretching. I saw some of you guys. It looks like you haven't stretched in years like me. So I give a unique opportunity today. Those that have heard me talk about housing in the last, 24 months really, because that's, but even time, I'm usually the guy. Tim took my role today, which is point out the problems, point out where we are. The doom and gloom guy, because like the numbers are bad, right? So thank you, Tim, for taking my role today, talking about the market itself. And I get to actually today talk about why we're here. And I think this is where you guys are getting to. Like, you're probably asking yourselves at this point, what is Housing to Protect Cape Cod? And what are y'all doing? What is this going to do differently? So let's talk. We're going to talk about that. But I want to bring back up a slide from Tim, and because I think this is really important to talk about. We can't build our way out. We can't fund our way out. We can't do one solution to solve a problem, right? This problem. And, I get so frustrated. Jim just talked about Yarmouth, right? Well, if it's only going to do 25 units a year, what's the point in doing it? Right? Like, that's the comment. Well, there's no silver bullet. We're not here today that there's a silver bullet. But we are going to talk about actions you can take. We are going to talk about our values, our mission, why we're here, and what we're doing here. So I want to talk about this building permit slide, though. As Tim talked about it, I want to show you some examples. So I've worked in housing policy all over the country. And when you see areas that actually grow, and whether you think it or not, Cape Cod doesn't have growth. Okay, I want to be very clear about that. You might see a new apartment complex. You might see a new house, but Cape Cod doesn't grow. And so when I look at areas, and I've worked in that cap building permits a year, they're capping building permits at 2, 3, or 4% growth a year. They're saying, okay, we can't grow more than 2, 3, or 4% a year. Tim's slide earlier about the submarkets showed one submarket on Cape Cod that grows at 0.6 units a year, 0.6% a year. That means the rest of them could grow at literally 5 times the rate they're growing and still barely get to where other communities cap their growth rate at. And so, like, what I'm saying is you could double that growth rate that we've had and still not really have a problem. But we do have challenges, and I don't want to recognize, because Paul's talked a lot about that too as well. So 20 years of the same housing policy, 20 years of focusing on capital A, AMI restricted, wage, only certain wages, growth policy has got us here. We have not changed, and most things that we've heard in the last 2 or 3 years is not a change in our housing policy. It's put more money into housing. It's put more things into housing. Everything you can do but build housing, right? Everything you can do but change zoning. Everything you can do but think differently. And so 30 years, 20 years, however long, and I'm sorry if you've been in the housing world for 20 or 30 years and we tried things. They haven't worked. You can't say our housing strategy has worked. No one can when you look at Tim's presentation. So I'm not saying that to say your work hasn't been valuable. It has, but we've got to do more. We've got to do different things. So I want to point that out there. So what is Housing to Protect Cape Cod? We believe we have come together, and I'll talk a little bit about why we're part of this, but we believe that to protect Cape Cod, housing development is key to the economic sustainability of our region and can be designed to preserve our unique coastal environment. Rob asked this earlier. You love the place of Cape Cod. You love the people of Cape Cod. Well, I'll say this. People say, well, if you build more housing or if you do things differently, it's not going to be the same place as before. But Rob talked about the other part of Cape Cod. The other part of Cape Cod is the people. And if you don't protect Cape Cod, part of protecting Cape Cod is protecting the people, protecting the workforce, the businesses, everything about Cape Cod. And when you start, what we're doing is we're showing that's changing, right? And so that's why it's Housing to Protect Cape Cod. And so some people might think that name might be a little different, but I want to show you that. What we are is a collaborative effort that believes that our housing strategy, back slide, sorry. It's a collaborative strategy that's failed us and we demand that new approach. That's what we're talking about. And we also believe that housing development is the key to economic development, right? So I want to say this, why Cape Cod Islands Association of Realtors is so heavily invested in this movement and has been in housing availability and affordability strategy on the Cape for years, right? When you talk to our members, and we have several in the room, so if you're a realtor, please stand up real quick because I want people to go to you and ask you this question afterwards. All right, thank you very much. I want y'all go to find those people afterwards and ask this question. What is the most meaningful real estate transaction you've ever been a part of? It is not selling that $10 million house on the water. It is helping that first-time home buyer finally move out of that cycle of renting and moving around from place to place that we talked about and getting into that home of their own, right? And doing that in the value and pride of changing lives, transforming lives, not just their life, their children's lives. They're changing their great-grandchildren's lives with home ownership who might not even come along for 40 years. And we know that because the data shows that, right? That families that have home ownership transform future generations of that family that aren't even born today. So that is why this is so important. All right. Why we're a collaborative effort is we are working together while we have a core group of groups that are together saying we work together. We are reaching out to all these other groups on the screen. We're saying there are partner groups. There are voices in the field, right? We're all regional groups, right? Cape Cod Chamber, Housing Assistance, myself, our group. We look at it, whether it's Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, we're looking at the region together, right? And so we can't be in every town. There are other groups that can be. And so we're going to talk about what those groups can do, what you can do as individuals today in this presentation. But I just wanted to point out that this is a collaborative effort. This is not just the Chamber of Realtors and HAC saying, do this. All right. Our goal is a housing market that, no? I'm good? Y'all can hear me? Okay. A housing market that lets people move when they want, where they want, and not when they have to for rentals and home ownership. That's simple. That's a simple idea, right? But we're not seeing that, okay? We talked about this before, and we'll talk about it before. How many people are living in a house that doesn't fit their needs, but they can't move anywhere, right? How many people are being displaced in a rental market? We've heard from these businesses, 10% I was doing math on the side, 10% of their employees over the last 2 years have left not because they wanted to leave their job, but because they couldn't find the housing to be in their job, right? So if we do that, our housing strategy for the last 10 years or 20 years for some reason, and I know the reason, but we're not going to get into it, has been, okay, get to 10%, right? 10%. That was never designed as a goal. It was designed as a benchmark, right? But we've turned that into some ultimate goal. You're not going to necessarily get there. You don't need to. And the reason why that's a goal is to stop housing. Think about it, okay? So think about that. Like that's the end goal, right? In the head of why we've ingrained these housing production plans. I asked the author of most of the housing production of the Cape, why is that the goal? Well, that's because they want to stop housing. She told me point blank, that is why select boards and planning boards make that their goal. All right. In the other room, raise your hand. In your neighborhood, can this house be built? Raise your hand. Do you think this house can be built in your neighborhood? Yes? How many think yes? Raise your hand. Yes? Only that many? Why do you think it can't be built? What? That's 5 units. That's 5 units. That is 5 units. That can't be built. Do you mind if that's your neighbor? Well, some do. Jim's heard a lot of people say they mind if that's their neighbor lately, right? Do you care? I don't. All right, next slide. Edgartown. How many people want our village centers to feel and look like this? All right, the places we love around Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket, you could not build today. I've heard this, many of you may know Andres Duani, one of the greatest urbanist land planners in ever, probably, especially in the second half of the 20th century and into today. He says this all the time when he goes to the places that he loves. He says, the places I love today can't be built today, right? Think about that. Can you build downtown Chatham today? Can you build Provincetown today? Can you build Osterville today? Osterville's got more multifamily than you would ever think about. You can't build that today, right? Like, you can't build the places we cherish and think of as Cape Cod. The reason why when you drive around and you see the places you don't like, the reason why that gets built is because that's what we say can get built. That's as Peter Freeman has often said, his clients go to the path of least resistance. And that is the path of least resistance. What you're getting is the path of least resistance today. And that's why our housing strategy has failed. All right, why are these girls so threatening to you? Not to you, but to the Cape Cod community. Are they scary? Are y'all scared of them? What? I'm not scared of them. All right? Are you scared of them, Julian?
No, I'm thrilled there's a Golden Girls reference.
Right. Their setup is illegal in almost every town on the Cape. And that's what I'm glad the lady is starting that home share movement, because that's one of the solutions, right? And why are they so scary? All right, next slide. The current rules of the road, that's what we're talking about, are not allowed. The housing strategy has failed for what we can do. But there is path. And what we are, as a Housing Protect Cape Cod, what we're put together is the resources to help you move forward. So we have skills, we have talent, we have resources, we have funding, we have ideas, not funding to do things, but to get things passed. And we're going to talk about that as we introduce our next speaker as well a little bit. We have those resources. Think of us as that resource group. Don't sit around and say, oh, well, we come to us with the problem. In our town, we need to solve this, this, and this, or whatever. Because we're putting together an agenda, which is more like, I think of more as a toolbox of solutions, right? I think we're at like 50 right now of real solutions that probably almost every town on the Cape can take advantage of, right? So that's what we're here for, and we'll talk about how you can go do that in your community. We're not here to come in your community and say, you've got to do this, but if your community is not going to move it, we'll come in and help you and partner with you and do that. So I want to say this. So change is possible, and I want to talk about that because I've been on the Cape 8 years. In my 8 years here, I've seen 2 big things that have actually, in policy on the Cape, moved things. And I want to talk about both those movements. All right? People have brought up before accessory dwelling units, right? That's when I got to the Cape 8 years ago, I went around in the real estate and in non-real estate communities everywhere and said, what's a low-hanging fruit that we can start working on today that just hasn't had the resources, the attention, or something else to try to move the needle on housing? And resoundingly, I heard back accessory dwelling bylaws. in-law apartments, cottages, backyard cottages, that sort of thing, right? So while they have now passed bylaws now with Dennis last week in 13 of the 15 towns, that wasn't by accident. And I don't know if people realize that. The Association of Realtors ourselves have put about over $150,000 into lobbying and advocacy on accessory dwellings over the last 6 years, right? So this wasn't by accident. We worked with our partners, the same partners that are creating this, to say how to do that, right? It's a strategy by approach. And these last couple that are holding out, we're going to go in by force almost and say, okay, you don't want to do this? We're forced you. Jim said there's a meeting next week in Yarmouth. The meeting next week's in Yarmouth only because we filed a citizen's petition and said, you got to do this. And they said, okay, well, we don't necessarily want to do your citizen's petition. Can we at least have a meeting? And we're like, okay, we'll talk about it. Let's talk about it. We're willing to postpone that to have the cover, but it was by force. It wasn't by choice. So there are mechanisms within law to do it, and you have constitutional rights to address your government and petition your government for this. So I just want to be clear. The other big one I want to talk about is the strategy that should be employed to take on big issues around the Cape is what Paul Nitzwicki and Andy Gottlieb did. And I want the two of them to stand up real quick. Please stand up. Because everyone in this room and everyone in the Cape Cod community owes you two a thank you for what you've done on wastewater and the approach you took on wastewater. And that's the approach and the model we're going to do as Housing to Protect Cape Cod. Take what these two men, these two giants of Cape Cod public policy did, and move it toward housing. The reason why I say that model is because early on, they both came to me and said, Ryan, we've got to bring you into the fold. We've got to talk to you because you could be an adversary. But we don't want you to be an adversary. We want you to see how this can benefit you. And they did that. And we got on board. And now their work is going to lay the biggest groundwork for how we solve this problem, right? The Grow Smart Cape Cod maps right there on there. And the work Andy did on that and the work Elisa did on that, if you haven't looked at that, is going to lay the groundwork we talk about. And you hear Paul say this all the time. He always talks about zoning, and then he uses one phrase after that, in appropriate places. And what he means by appropriate places is that map. The work that Andy said, we can't do this same old housing strategy for 30 years. We've got to do it differently. He's bought everyone already into this. And so we've got to then take that basis and move that ball forward. So I just want to put that out there. Change is possible. And look at those two ways that's happened to say, those two issues have happened to say we can do this. We can do this. So how do we do this? How? That's the biggest question. All right. We're back. Yeah, one more. Okay. So there's a lot of different steps. So when we said we're making the resources available, here are some of the things that we're offering today. We have more. We can do reviews of bylaws. We can write bylaws for you. We can do all that kinds of stuff. But first, you've got to get people wanting to get stuff done, right? Because we talked about this today. And Senator Julian Sear is going to talk about this in a second. But you have to approach town meeting. People talked about town meeting. You have to approach town meeting as a political campaign. People hate politics, but politics is how you actually make change, right? So you have to, and if anyone's seen the work we've done on wastewater, where we've come in as an organization in certain towns like Andy in Mashpee when we worked with him, or on ADUs or other things, you come in and you run that campaign like a political campaign. Town meeting, all it is the same thing, right? As long as more people show up than that don't, well, and some zoning issues, 2/3 more people show up than don't, right? Than the other side, you win. It's a math game. All these issues are math. And I know some people really hate math, so that's going to be difficult, but hopefully we all can talk about 50 plus 1 and 2/3. But So a couple of the resources, right? You want to make people understand how you think and how to be an advocate like you. We'll do advocacy training in your region, right? In your area. Talk to us. Town huddles. What we really want you to do is go back and organize, and we provide the resources, the manpower, and at times anything you might need to do a town huddle in your town. And when I say town huddle, I mean it's because it's going to be y'all are huddling about, okay, here's the problems we see, and then Housing Protect Cape Cod, what are some of those solutions to help solve those problems? What are other things we can do? Okay, we really like this idea. How do we get this done? Talk to us, and we'll help you. So that's the town huddle thing. We want you to go back in your town, and we'll connect you with the people in this room in your town if you tell us, right? And say, okay, you want to organize a town huddle. Say how many people in this room are from Orleans? Raise your hand. All right, so all of you guys that just raised your hand, y'all hold a town huddle in the first quarter of next year. The first quarter is our goal. Have every town hold a town huddle. How are we going to move forward? We'll help you convene sub-regionally, because we talked about this before, right? The regional approaches. You talked about this, right? The regional approaches. So, Orleans and Chatham, they're regional. I mean, as much as they say, oh, we're Orleans, we're different from Chatham, we're different from Orleans. People don't know that. Like, they do know that, but they go back and forth every day, right? Heck, you can drive from Harwich through Chatham back to Harwich, right? So, and you stay on the same road. So, these things aren't, they run together. They've got to be worked on together, right? Like Matt Cole, when he has a job in his Chatham office, he doesn't say, well, what Chatham residents can I hire? He goes, regionally, who can I hire, right? So I just want to say that, we've got to move the needle. Definitely, right? That's the key. You've got to move that needle. We're not going to solve this with some silver bullet. I don't know how many of y'all did walk in here hoping that we gave you one answer that would solve the housing crisis on Cape Cod today. Did y'all hope that? I'm sorry. Did we fail? But anyways, I just want to go through that, right? And get involved, right? Only because it's been the last couple of weeks, Jim Saban and I, talk to Jim about what he's going through. Find out what it feels like, what that feels like to him, because that is what you have to get more people involved with you, or you're going to be Jim. But anyways, all right. What is one action? We talked about several things that we're going to have resources for. We have resources for more. What is one action? Use your poll. Tell us one action you're going to do. Did they say after today? Good. I was hoping you'd say today, but after today, when you leave here. And the next, I'd say, I'm going to give you till the end of the month. What's the one action you're going to do by the end of the month when you leave here? And we're taking notes on who it is through your cell phone. We got your number, and we are going to call you on December 1st and say, did you do that? Not really, but it would be really cool if we did, right? All right. Yes. It looks like you have a question. Well, not this town meeting, because we're actually postponing the article because they've now agreed to work with us and before. So I want to put that out there. But on the 16th, they're going to start that. But if they don't work quick enough, we're bringing it back. Okay? Let's just be clear, right? The goal is not to be disruptful. The goal is to be cooperative, collaborative. But if you are not cooperative and collaborative in your town, we're going to come for you. I'm sorry. Point blank. I give the honor to introduce the next speaker. And while some people in our lives are very similar, we share certain people in our lives who think you and I are a little bit too much the same sometimes. Yet we're also very different, right? You and I, the next speaker, Senator Julian Cyr, him and I don't always agree on everything. But the one thing is we both have a passion to solve this issue, and we're coming at it from the same way, right? And that's the way I look at everything in life, right? So I say this, everyone moved to the Cape, or some people were, moved here in the 1800s, right? Obviously. But everyone else, you live on the Cape because you choose to, for the most part, right? Because it's hard to be here. It's not easy, right? You live here because you love it. And no one loves change, right? Let's be clear. No one loves it. No one thrives on it, right? And what I say is this. As long as you agree that change is inevitable, that your town, your street, your community will not stay the same forever, because it won't. Your neighborhood, change is inevitable. As long as you agree to change is inevitable, I think most everyone, how many people want change for the worse and how many people want change for the better? If you want change for the worse, raise your hand. Andy, you're not ready? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So as long as we all agree that we want the change to be for the better, now we're all working in the same direction. We can discuss what better is, what better looks like, and then how to get to better. And I think this state, Senator Julian Cyr really embodies that sentiment, right? He wants to help Cape Cod get better, and then he wants to have that discussion of what better looks like and how to get to better. And so I really appreciate the effort you're taking on and appreciate you being here, and also, laying the groundwork for this initiative. Most people don't know he was the driving force behind it. Him and I, over coffee, beer, whatever we ended up drinking at times, everything pretty much on the sun on that, right? Have these conversations and then able to use things to get this started. And so I want to thank you for being here and talking, because you really are kind of the driving force behind this movement here. As you've talked to Elisa and I, saying, y'all have got to get this going. Y'all have got to move in this direction. So thank you very much for being here.